Good afternoon, everybody, on this Friday as we get ready for Snowmageddon here in the great I 95 corridor from Washington up to Boston. Anyway, uh, there's a couple of football games, Matthew, this weekend that are relatively important.
Yeah. The AFC and the NFC championship. I think one's probably got a little less luster to it now than it would have, had Bo Nix not snapped his ankle on one of the final plays of the game
Hmm.
against Buffalo. But the other one on the other side in the NFC, it's two teams from what has been the best conference in football throughout this entire year, and that's the NFC West
Hmm.
with the Rams and the Seahawks.
Well, it's going to be an interesting thing to be sure. Um, I, can the Orange Crush there in Buffalo, not in Buffalo, in Denver, muster enough points? What do you think?
No, I mean, what's it called? The conversation surrounding the New England Patriots has been interesting, I think, to watch. Everybody talks about Drake May. They talk about the Patriots' schedule. That Patriots defense has played really well throughout the entirety of the regular season and the postseason. Um, and they've been, I feel like, because the defense of the Broncos and the Texans, I feel like because they were so highlighted and they're so talked about and kind of in the mainstream, that the Patriots defense kind of flew under the radar a little bit. And it's something where that New England defense, it has been really good throughout the season. Like, yes, CJ Stroud didn't look good, but part of that is because of what New England was doing on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a really well built team defensively. They got Milton Williams this past offseason in free agency to plug up the middle of that defense. They went out and they got Carlton Davis to pair alongside Christian Gonzalez in the secondary. And so they did a lot of good stuff in the offseason in terms of defensive additions. And they're paying off for them. They drafted well on the offensive line, but they signed a lot on the defense, it seemed like. And that's the way they built it. That, and you pair the fact that Denver is missing their starting quarterback. And I get it. I liked what Sean Payton did and how he handled it. He came to the podium, he had full confidence in Jared Stidham to go out there and get the job done. It was plain and obvious that's who it was. And if you're going to be competitive in a spot like this, in a situation that Denver's put themselves in, it's absolutely the approach that you have to take. But that doesn't mean that it sets them up for success any better on the football field necessarily.
Well, I mean, I think they're doing what they can do,
Yeah.
um, and I think um, we're all looking forward to seeing how it turns out.
Yeah. I, a matchup that I am curious about, because I think he slowed down a little bit in the second half, but he was still fantastic throughout the year. He's a defensive player of the year candidate, and that's the Broncos edge rusher Nick Bonito.
Hmm.
And he's a guy that wins with speed a lot. Like when he wins, it's because of his speed rush. He's essentially, like, you watch it, it looks like he's pretty much just running around guys in terms of how he's rushing the passer. And the reason that I'm talking about him is because they're probably going to line him up across from Will Campbell, the rookie offensive tackle out of LSU. And Will Campbell's dealt with some injuries this year. He's been up and down in terms of his production on the football field. But
Hmm.
last week against Houston, he had a hard time specifically with a guy who hasn't historically been as much of a speed rusher, more of a power guy, in Will Anderson. He was having problems with Will Anderson and his speed around the edge. Drake May fumbled 4 times. A good portion of that was because of his blind side not being blocked up well by Will Campbell. And so he's going to have his hands full with that edge rusher. And if Benito is able to get off the edge and if he's able to force fumbles in the same way, that's Denver's path to victory right there. They can win it on the edge if they're able to cause turnovers and plus territory for that offense that will most likely struggle with Jared Stidham at quarterback.
Let's talk about what I mean. It looks on paper like we just talked about, like the Patriots are going to win this game.
Mhm.
Um, what would Denver have to do to get past the Patriots? Do you think that, with their second string quarterback in there and a guy who hasn't played in like forever, that Peyton can pull him up enough to put points on the board?
Yeah, I don't think Jared Stidham is a bad quarterback by any measure, but
Mhm.
he's a guy like this. This is the NFL. This isn't college football. These guys don't like the backups don't get as many reps throughout the week as the
Mhm.
starters do. That's the way those practices go. So he's spent the entire season taking the backup reps. Now he's taking the starter reps.
Mhm.
He obviously will know the offense. I don't think he's a bad quarterback by any measure, but I
Right.
wonder just how prepared he is. And this is a different stage. Like this stage in and of itself, and maybe the suddenness of it all kind of numbs the stage a little bit for him, and that might
Mhm.
help him. Um, but this is still the AFC Championship, and that stage is still going to matter in terms of whether or not a guy feels the pressure. He'll feel the game pressure eventually after that adrenaline wears off in that first quarter, um,
Mhm.
and does he start to press? Does he start to cause issues? This is going to rely solely on how well is Denver able to run the football against New England, and can they force turnovers? Because if they can't do those two things, then they're not going to win this football game. Plain and simple. Their defense is really good. I get that, but their defense also gave up 30 to the Buffalo Bills last week. And Drake May he hasn't. It's not been smooth by any measure throughout this, but he's handled good defenses throughout the full 60 minutes of a football game.
Well, it's the funny thing is that with the weather here in the East, if that game were to be played in Boston instead of Denver, the snow would be way more of a factor.
Yeah, and another thing, like it's talked about every time that it happens. Like there's a big game in Denver, whether it be whatever team it is, but the altitude plays a factor. It's going to play a factor for New England. It's something that they're not used to. It's something Denver is used to. Um, is that something that affects them early, or is it something that affects them late? I don't know, but I think it's going to play a factor, and it can be a helpful factor. Home field means a lot for Denver, and it's going to be the reason that this is going to be a larger spread, obviously, than it would have been had Bo Nix been playing.
Right.
But how big is the spread going to be? I think it's not going to be as big as some people may think it's going to be.
Hmm.
Um, but at the end of the day, I just don't know if they're going to have what it takes in order to beat New England with the backup quarterback. Like the backup looms large in here. I know people compare him to Nick Foles. This is not a Nick Foles comparison. Like the Nick Foles comparison isn't something that works. Nick Foles was a guy that got plugged in at the back half of a regular season and was their starting quarterback throughout the playoffs. He had starting reps. He had been through the different stages of the playoffs. He had felt the pressure and stuff like that. And that's stuff like you can't emulate any of this stuff in practice. It's just not possible. Those reps are reps that he hasn't had and can't just magically get back in a week. Game action is something that he hasn't really felt in a while. And this stage is something that he hasn't felt really probably since he was at Auburn back in 2017 in the SEC title game.
Well, I mean, I think that what we're gonna see in many ways is sad because you want at this point, championship wise, you want to see both teams at least at the as close to the best that they can be.
Yeah.
And now that's not going to happen. So if they're lucky enough, fortunate enough to play hard enough to get to the Super Bowl, Denver's still a hobbled team.
Yeah. And listen, this is I like if Denver wins, it'll be a good story. But if Denver wins, that's the worst result of the two for the NFL because all of the advantages that they have playing to help them this week, geez, they disappear in the Super Bowl. Like there's 2 weeks to prepare, and that helps. That would be good for Jared Stidham. But the team that they'll be facing in the Super Bowl is you can't predict injury, but you would assume is going to be full go. You get rid of the altitude, you get rid of the home field, you give the other team some game film to watch on Jared Stidham, and whatever this result is, say they do beat New England, then you're in for what is most likely going to be a blowout of a Super Bowl if Denver were to make it.
Yeah, and I think that given the fact that this weekend, so many people, because of the weather in the country, will have an opportunity to sit down and decide, okay, well, we're going to watch the game, and they're not going to see representative team from Denver.
Yeah, and look, Denver's. I will say there is something in the cards here because people have been highly critical of Denver's offense, and I'm not saying that this is a Bo Nix problem or anything like that. But what if the Denver offense looks a little better, a little more fluid with a different guy quarterback? Hey, like that's something that's possible. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's something that's definitely possible in the cards for them.
Yep, and well, we'll see. I think the Patriots will win. If I agree with you, it's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but it's definitely going to be tough.
Yeah, yeah, and that's I I think that Denver has a pathway, but in the full term of 60 minutes, I think some of the outside factors will eventually get to Jared Stidham.
Mm-hmm.
Those Patriot cornerbacks are still really good, like the tandem of Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez. That's a really good tandem. They've gotten a lot better. It's been like a seemingly miraculous turnaround in New England from a team that I think their over under on the win total is like 5.5 coming into the year. They were a 4-win football team last season. No one expected them to do this. And you can make comments to their schedule or what have you, but the matter of the fact is that they still had to beat a really good Los Angeles Chargers football team in the playoffs. Then they had to beat what people called a Super Bowl caliber defense in the playoffs. Like there's a guy, I think he's a part of the Mad Dog family on Sirius XM.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple weeks ago, he said he thought LA was going to beat New England in the playoffs. That didn't come to fruition. Then he put out a tweet and said that he thought that the Houston Texans and that defense made them a Super Bowl caliber team. New England beat them. And then he went on the radio and said if the Patriots were to make the Super Bowl, this would be the biggest joke and they don't deserve it at all. So he was talking out of two sides of his mouth. That's the way people tend to like this thing. It's the way people tend to cover this stuff is that, they want to ridicule and criticize the Patriots. That's fine, whatever. The matter of the fact is that you put however many is it? You put 19 football games in front of them, and so far they're in one of the last 3 games of the season.
Yeah, you can't take away the fact that they played well.
Yeah.
And in many ways, it's kind of a destiny thing, right?
Yeah.
This is a team that looks a lot like, well, hell, it looks a lot like Indiana. It's a team where, hey, you didn't expect at the beginning of the season they were going to be there.
Yep.
Number one. Number two, you didn't expect them to sail through the playoffs, which they have. And now they're in the championship game, and they're worthy of that.
Yeah. And
So they are clearly, they're clearly the best team at this point in time in the AFC.
Yeah. And look, they also have another parallel. They both have quarterbacks that everybody loves, too. Because and maybe this is just something where I've wound up on the New England side of X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. But Drake May seems to be like a household name and very much like a beloved superstar, especially in New England.
In New England, they're calling him the Baby Brady.
Yeah, he's got the. I've seen the nickname where they call him Drake May. Like his nickname is his name,
right?
Which is hilarious. At least I think it is. So yeah, he's garnered a lot of attention. This Patriots football team's garnered a lot of attention throughout the season, especially in this past month. But they've handled it well and they've won football games. And albeit it's probably a little bit easier path than most people are used to the Super Bowl. But they've taken advantage of the path they've been given.
Well, that's it. I mean, it circumstances in the games. I mean, how many times have we seen people going into playoff games without one or two of their absolute best players?
Yeah. No,
Normally it's not the quarterback, but yeah, it can be.
yeah. And it's not like New England's been without injury either. They've been shifting and shuffling on that offensive line for a good portion of the back half of this year. And so there's been injuries that have caused that. But look, they've found ways to win. They found a way to win in Baltimore. Like they found a way to win in Buffalo earlier this year. The good teams they've faced, it's not like they've curled up, laid down, and gotten their ass beat. They've very much been up to the task when they've played the better teams in the NFL.
Mhm.
And if they were to make it to the Super Bowl, I mean, that's your better Super Bowl matchup, and it's one where you wouldn't expect them to change anything there once they got to the biggest stage.
Let's go a little further up north to Seattle. And we got the Rams and the Seahawks in what could be a very, very exciting game.
Yeah. Funny enough that both of these games, they're played on the West Coast. They're missing this major snow
Right.
and ice storm that's coming the East Coast way. Actually, a plus for them. Like normally playing in Seattle, Washington wouldn't necessarily be a plus, but it is this time. So this is a game where the total point differential between the two teams was 1. The Rams won by 2, I believe it was, against Seattle when they played at home earlier this season, and
Mhm.
Seattle won by a point when they played them earlier in the year, earlier last year, in Seattle. Like these have been two of the most evenly matched teams in football this year. They've been the two best teams in the NFC this year, regardless of what you think of other teams outside of them. They have been the best. They have been the standard. So this is as evenly matched of a football game as you can have in terms of what both of these teams bring to the table. I will say I wonder if the stage doesn't get to Sam Darnold. This is a Rams team that knocked Sam Darnold out of the playoffs last year. That
Mhm.
14-3 Vikings team went to Arizona because of the wildfires in LA. Went to Arizona, played LA, and Sam Darnold didn't show up well against LA in that playoff game. They got housed. This is his chance at revenge, though, against Sean McVay and the Los Angeles Rams.
Yep. And how sweet would it be to have the two guys that everybody talks about as the potential MVPs squaring off in the Super Bowl?
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. This is, I've talked about it, but it feels like over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of discourse about whether or not Matthew Stafford's a Hall of Famer. Um, I think you look at the numbers, and he is. I just because the accolades necessarily like all pros, the all pros don't line up for Matthew Stafford to make the Hall of Fame and stuff like that. But when you toss an MVP with a guy who's also top 7 all time in passing yards and has a Super Bowl, and you put in another Super Bowl appearance and his time in LA, and you consider where he was for the majority of his career, I don't see how you keep this guy out of the Hall of Fame if he were to win this football game and make it to the Super Bowl.
What I think it's important to note is anybody who doesn't think Matt Stafford is a Hall of Fame quarterback doesn't know football. There are guys in the Hall of Fame with a lot less credentials than Matt Stafford.
Yeah, and it's not what gets you into the Hall of Fame. Like you can't put people in Hall of Fames based on talent. Like that's not a determining factor. But there's
Mhm.
been people with a lot less talent than Matthew Stafford that have made it into the Pro Football Hall of Fame as well. What this guy does on a weekly basis with his arm, yeah, sometimes he trusts a little bit too much. But he's one of the best throwers of the football that's ever played the game.
Well, he's also very good at game managing,
Yeah.
which is an underappreciated rated skill.
Yeah, it's something that I'll watch late in this game because it's been seemingly a calling card for the majority of his career. Is does Matthew Stafford have the football in his hands late and need to go win the game? Because my God, has he done it pretty much every single time it's felt like he's needed to in his career. Like I know there's obviously missed opportunities, but he is one of the best. He's top five in terms of fourth quarter like game winning drives of all time.
Hmm.
It's something that he does extremely well. It's something that he did when they were playing in Carolina. I know Carolina's a football team that they probably shouldn't have needed a late drive to go win it on, but they did. He found Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee did make an incredible catch. He made a great play, but he got it done. I think back to last year's playoffs and think back to how close they were to beating Philadelphia. Like had their center played football on that
Hmm.
final snap, they very much could have beaten the Philadelphia Eagles, the eventual Super Bowl champions, in their building while it was you know pouring snow on them last year. Like that's how good they've been over these past few years. And it's something that I expect to continue. This has been one of the better pass defenses in the NFL in terms of the Seahawks. But both times Matthew Stafford has played them, he's been up to the task.
Well, I think that we're gonna have. I would love to see the two of the guys show up on at Super Bowl and just, for all intents and purposes, the debate could be ended on on the biggest stage you could possibly want it to be.
Yeah. The MVP voting will be over. The award will have been handed out at that point.
Hmm.
But if one guy, I will say that'll be a storyline going into it. Say these teams were to win. Say the Rams and the Patriots were to win. And that's a storyline 1,000% going into that football game is going to be which one of these guys did win the MVP. If it's Matthew Stafford, Drake may have a chip on his shoulder. If Drake May wins it, Matthew Stafford may have a chip on their shoulder. How much does that play into the actual football of it? I don't know. But when push comes to shove, these guys still have a game ahead of them before we get there.
Yeah, no question about it. Let's talk a little bit about Baltimore. I you know I gotta say, when it was announced, there was a bulletin that came across, and I was like, okay, the Ravens have made their choice. And then I looked at the name and I went, wait a minute. Wait a minute. You're telling me that of all the people out there, this is the guy you want?
Yeah, I was not a fan of the hire. Like straight up, I
You
just
should tell him. I'm sorry. I should have mentioned the man's name. You know, that would have been a good thing to do as well. The you know he he's the LA defensive coordinator, and it's you know it, it's one of those things where um, it, it's funny because they were talking about his that he had leverage. Jesse Minter had leverage on the Ravens because he had a couple of different teams wanted him or wanted to interview him. I don't know that that's leverage, and I don't know that Jesse Minter is the name that I would have picked out of the hat that for the Ravens. Now, for all I know, and I wish him well. It's not like I'm hoping he screws up, but Jesse Minter just didn't hit me. I know a lot of people liked it, liked them, um, but for that team in Baltimore, that's like giving the keys to a Ferrari to a 16-year-old kid.
yeah, kind of similar. It's I don't know. It for me it's like, it's not necessarily that, but it feels like you know, you're giving the keys of a Ferrari to a guy who races boats professionally. Like just because
Mhm.
he does one thing well doesn't mean he does the other. He's a defensive guy. Like he's done a really good job in LA since he got there. I have questions because he was on that Michigan staff that cheated in 2023. He'd been a part of those Michigan staffs as well. That's something that would play a factor in my decision making. But in terms of their defense, they were top 10 in most categories. Number 8 in opponents' points per game, number 7 in opponents' yards per game, number 5 in terms of how many touchdowns they gave up, number 2 in red zone scoring percentage in terms of touchdowns. So he coached a really good defense, and that's outside of the Michigan stuff. So it proves that he can do it regardless of circumstance around him, and I think that's important and that's good. But your keys is Lamar Jackson. It's the offense.
Right.
You hired a defensive guy where now your head coaching hire is also completely codependent on your offensive coordinator hire. Sometimes you can get away with it. Obviously, if you hire an offensive guy, then technically you're codependent on your defensive coordinator, and that's fine too. But when you have a guy in Lamar Jackson, you would think that you are hiring for Lamar. And they went and hired Jesse Minter. I don't know what his relationship's like with Lamar, but obviously that front office liked it. But having a first-time head coach step into an active Super Bowl window is definitely a choice.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing that I'm like you. I thought that the best situation would have been for them to go out and get the Seattle OC Kubiak.
Yeah.
I thought if you're going to go and take a swing, right? Swing for the fences, get the guy who, without question, has resurrected the careers of a couple of different people.
Yeah.
So he'd have been, to me, he might be, and believe me, I've been wrong many times. But to me, he's been a lot like Kyle Shanahan. He's flown under the radar, but he does whatever it takes to adapt his system to a quarterback. Because his system and the quarterback, when Sam Darnold got there, people were wondering, oh, wait, okay, fine. Seattle, Sam Darnold's going to go out there. How's he going to work in that system? Well, guess what? He worked fantastically in that system. In large part because, Kubiak is very good at adapt. I don't know what you need, but
yeah. And look, people didn't believe in this Seattle offense coming out of the offseason. And I mean, I think there was reasonable doubt to be had. They traded away Geno Smith. That was their starting quarterback. They signed Sam Darnold, who, as good as he was in Minnesota, that was 1 year. That's in terms of his overall career. That wasn't something Sam Darnold hadn't really proven what he was in terms of a quarterback throughout an elongated period, other than his 1 year in Minnesota. They traded away DK Metcalf. They lost a weapon in the secondary. They got rid of Tyler Lockett. He wasn't coming back either. They had questions about that receiving core. Jackson Smith and Jigba is now possibly, I think he should be, the offensive player of the year. Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet have played fantastic, and Sam Darnold has done exactly what he's been asked to in order to win football games there. They've been a team that, hasn't always needed to score a bunch of points, but when they have needed to score a bunch of points, they've been up to the task to do it. So they were the number 1 seed for a reason, and a lot of it has to do with the way they shape that offense to their new personnel.
Huh. It's definitely going to be interesting. I mean, I just don't know that no, sorry. I just don't know that this is the right fit, and we'll find out. But I think that I don't know why they went with the D coordinator, because that's not the problem they have. The problem they have is how to figure out what to do with Lamar Jackson. And I don't, as I said before, I don't wish any ill to Jesse Minter or the Ravens or any of the guys.
Hmm.
But let's just put it this way: it was a curious hire.
Yeah. I think the two aspects that surprised me most were the fact that he's going to be a first-time head coach in the NFL, and the
Right.
fact that he's a defensive guy. Like those are the two things that make me question the hire. And we went through and we broke it down, but at its core and at its simplest, those are the question marks that you have. But like I had talked about, when I was talking about Kevin Stefanski in Atlanta, people saying he doesn't fit the culture. Well, guess what? Guess what always fits a culture? Winning football games. So, we can sit here and we can question it, but if they go out there and they win the AFC North and they're, one of the top seeds in the playoffs and they make a deep run or they make the Super Bowl or something like that, then, all those questions disappear. But now it's up to Jesse Minter and the Baltimore Ravens football team to put those questions to bed.
Yeah, here's the part that I thought was kind of funny, and that is the deal with Baker Mayfield having beef with Stefanski. When they announced his hiring, and they asked Baker, what he thought about it, he goes, I can't wait to face this guy 2 times a year. He didn't have evidently Stefanski, when they got rid of Baker, it wasn't, Stefanski didn't call him up, didn't talk to him. General manager picked up the phone and said, Baker, we traded you to Carolina. And evidently Baker got pissed about the fact that he wasn't, the head coach didn't think enough of him to make a phone call.
Yeah. So I actually pulled it up because he responded to a tweet talking about the Falcons, something
Right.
talking about Kevin Stefanski and his quarterback situation in Cleveland during the time he was there. And Baker Mayfield, because the tweet said Baker Mayfield and Deshaun Watson failed. Baker Mayfield responded and said, failed is quite the reach, pal. Still waiting on a text/call from him after I got shipped off like a piece of garbage. Can't wait to see you twice a year, coach. That was his tweet.
Mhm.
To my knowledge, he has not responded to anybody else. He has
No.
not said anything else on the matter, but that was his tweet. Obviously, has very strong feelings in terms of the quarterback situation or in terms of Kevin Stefanski as a head coach. But when push comes to shove, this is a guy who did do a good job at times with his quarterbacks in Cleveland, but it was a dumpster fire. But the argument to be made there is he walked from one dumpster fire at quarterback into another dumpster fire at quarterback, and it's for different reasons. But the Falcons very much are still searching for an answer at quarterback. When you have Kirk Cousins sitting on the bench, albeit they finished the season fairly well, it still doesn't feel like the answer in Atlanta. And your supposed answer in Michael Penix is a guy who has his ACL repaired for the third time in his life. And he's not going to be back to start the year. I'm very curious to see where they go. They have to find some kind of a solution at quarterback with Kevin Stefanski, because that's really like your priority list in terms of the Atlanta Falcons. One A and 1B was finding a new head coach and finding a general manager.
Mm-hmm.
The number 2 on the list, and it falls very close behind 1A and 1B, is figuring out what you're doing at quarterback for not only part of it's this year and part of it's long term as well. What are you doing at that position for this year and the future? Because is Michael Penix your future? I think that's a legitimate question that has to be asked, given his performance when he's been on the football field for the Falcons. It hasn't been good. You can blame the coaches and what have you, but his performance on the football field hasn't been good. So the Falcons still have, they've hired Kevin Stefanski. Matt Ryan's now in that front office kind of running things. But they still have a lot of work left to do on this offseason in order to feel good about the spot they're in headed into next season.
Well, it's another in a long line of crazy that that comes seemingly to Atlanta on a regular basis. Um, but we'll see. I don't think he's a bad hire.
No, no, I don't think he is either. But people have drawn conclusions already based on his time in Cleveland and supposedly the way he handled Shador Sanders at quarterback. I mean, some of these people online are looking for every way just to bash this guy. I saw a clip where somebody was like, look at what Kevin Stefanski did on the first drive against the Pittsburgh Steelers. This was when Dylan Gabriel was in his first true start, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
They were playing the Steelers, and Kevin Stefanski put them in empty in the first drive inside like their own 15-yard line. Somebody's like, look at what he did with Dylan Gabriel, this young rookie quarterback, sticking him in empty against the Steelers. And like, do people not know what they're talking about? Empty formation for a young quarterback simplifies the picture. Like that makes things easier for a quarterback to determine what the coverage is and where his read is. Mm-hmm. So, people have these discussions, but you have to be able to decipher when people know what they're talking about and when they don't. And there's a lot of, I would call it probably brain dead discourse surrounding the Kevin Stefanski hire in Atlanta.
Well, a lot of people, when they look at a coach or player or whatever, right? You look at Sam Darnold and you go, hell, you look at Baker Mayfield, where you're talking about Baker. And they automatically attach the journeyman quarterback. He couldn't get it done in Cleveland, so they sent him to Carolina. He wasn't even good enough for them to finish the season with him. And so they threw him out to Los Angeles, where, he filled in when Matt Stafford got hurt.
Yep.
So in this case, Stefanski, the fact that he was coached at Cleveland and the team, lost more than they won, doesn't mean he's a bad coach. It just may mean that the organization doesn't know how to put players on the field.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and like the Cleveland Browns are historically an unsuccessful franchise. And it seems to be at this point something where you're not a coach away. Like it's not as simple as that. They need a full reset in terms of top to bottom, like even ownership. Ownership can make a significant difference in the way that an organization is ran and the overall success of it. So listen, they're long past due for a change in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Like clean house changes in Cleveland, seemingly. Mm-hmm. But will that ever happen? I don't know. Fans can clamor for a quarterback all they want, but the matter of the fact is that they can take some successful guys or have had successful guys in that building, and they can't succeed with them.
I think the Browns, over the past at least 3 years, maybe 4, have been more focused on their brand new stadium they want to build than they have on their team.
Yeah. I mean, like the Deshaun Watson trade is one of, if not the worst trades in NFL history. Like when you pair the guaranteed money that they gave this guy, along with the picks that they gave up to get this guy, and the results that have happened, and who he has been off the football field as well,
right?
It is the worst trade in NFL history, most likely, and executed by the front office in Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, okay, if you're going to trade for Deshaun Watson, right? Why are you going to give him an extension before he ever plays a game on your side?
Yeah, I mean I think that was a big piece of these people in trading for Deshaun Watson. Like the teams that were in on him, it was discussed that like an extension was going to be a part of the deal because they wanted to be able to lock this guy up long term because he was heading into free agency. I think the year after the 1 year that they had guaranteed with him. So that was a big piece in the trade, and I think everybody was offering extensions, but the Browns are the ones that went above and beyond in terms of the guaranteed money that they offered him, which was way too much. So that's fair, but again, just another failure. And when you look at look at this team, like you can criticize Kevin Stefanski, you can criticize quarterbacks. Their wide receiver one is Jerry Jeudy,
right?
That's not an acceptable wide receiver one. can you tell me who their running back one is? Like, do they have a coherent running back room? Quinshon Judkins, the rookie out of Ohio State, was probably their best back, and even then, there was relative inconsistency when it came to him, along with the other members of that backfield. Like Jerome Ford was their one holdover. The other two backs, including Judkins, were rookies. So there was the position groups in Cleveland were bad. The quarterback room in Cleveland was bad. The one position group that they had like a bona fide star at was their tight end and David Njoku.
Yeah, I mean, what I was about to say was man, it's I still can't figure out why Nick Chubb got shipped off.
Yeah, I mean that was a guy that wanted to be in Cleveland, like
Right.
Cleveland, which I haven't been to Cleveland, but I have been to the state of Ohio. It's not an easy state to love in terms of the surrounding areas of Ohio, the greater Ohio area. It's not the most fantastic and beautiful state of all time. So when you have a guy that's that committed to that state, and especially that committed to that franchise in the Cleveland Browns, given its history, you would think it'd be in your best interest to keep a guy that likes it there and is a fan favorite there for a while, but they opted not to.
Yeah, I mean, look, I spent a lot of time in Cleveland. I actually spent 5 years there working, and because that was where I was based. I did Detroit, Chicago. It's a Midwest deal. They've got some of the best fans in all of sports.
Yeah, they absolutely have to.
And
I mean,
and-
with
and
what
the
some of those
team-
franchises
right.
put them through.
the problem here's it's the little bitty thing that some people forget, and that is that the team that the team we're talking about is a team that plays in Baltimore.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but it's true.
Yeah.
And that is the you've got I remember going. I mean, we did all kinds of fun stuff, and it really was wild. That team was a good team. I'm talking about the Bernie Kosar team that battled John Elway in those two. And then if people forget that it was Belichick and Saban who was the coach, that was there whenever Art Modell, who had issues with both Cleveland and his minority owners, took the easy way out and took money from Baltimore and went down and moved the team. So Cleveland was a model franchise for a long time.
Yeah.
And then the NFL was terrified that because, well, first of all, they didn't want Modell to move the team. And that was one issue. But the second issue was that the only way they were going to allow him to move the team is if they actually turned around and gave them, an expansion team.
Yeah.
And I never thought that made any sense. That they didn't block him, meaning didn't block. They could have gone the other route, right? They could have turned around and went, okay, we're going to block you from moving the Browns. We're going to give Baltimore an expansion franchise. But they did it ass backwards, and I don't understand. I mean, we all have heard the situations of the moving of the Baltimore Colts in the middle of the night, right? But that was during the off season. When this was announced, was in the middle of the regular season.
Yeah.
And I know this for a fact because I have friends of mine who own the radio rights. who gave $2.4 million to the Browns for the radio rights for 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly had every sponsor they had on the radio network pulled all their ads on it.
Mm.
If you looked at the stadium in Cleveland, and I did a Browns game for NBC. Is it NBC? I think it was NBC. Might have been CBS. Doesn't matter. Back there, they literally had to go and get tarps and cover advertisers' names on billboards, on scoreboards, on everything because not anybody wanted to be, there.
Yeah.
Be part of. They were basically boycotting, um, you know, Art Modell, and Art was getting death threats um, from people, and he never, to the best of my knowledge, he never went back into Ohio,
No.
which is probably the safest thing, and he'll never get in the Hall of Fame,
Mm-mm.
which is sad because actually, if you take out the fact, if you take away the fact that he moved that franchise, Art Modell was one of the most pivotal people in the history of the National Football.
Yeah.
So anyway, the genesis of how Cleveland screwed up was because the league didn't pick the right ownership group.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that, bad ownership tanks franchises, regardless of where they are, because it does. I mean, there's obviously they're the owners, so it affects every single facet of a team in a franchise all the way through. So, when your stadium is bad, then people don't want to show up. When your product is bad, people don't want to show up. People don't want to advertise with you. The owners, sometimes owners don't spend money on players and stuff like that. It can affect a team and really tank a franchise entirely when your ownership group is that bad. And if it is bad, you'll remain in sports purgatory. Like you won't get better no matter how bad you are, seemingly, if you don't have some form of a coherent ownership group at the helm.
Well, it's gonna be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of crazy, Jim, I do want to touch on one thing because
Sure.
we talked about it some yesterday. The transfer portal in college sports.
Hmm.
I know I talked about, what the negative or like the downside in terms of what this portal can be and how it actually, it can hurt some players.
Hmm.
I was watching a clip yesterday of I think it was Josh Pate on the Rich Eisen show,
Okay.
and he had the numbers. There's still 1,200 players, over 1,200 players actively in the portal that are not committed to a school.
Hmm.
That's just football. Like that's just this cycle of football. And these are guys, and I'm not, all 1,200 are not, not saying that they won't find a home because all the deadline period is that you supposedly have to be in the portal, but as we've seen through legal actions, it also kind of doesn't matter if you're in the portal by that window because there's legal ways around it. Um, but yeah, as of right now, there's 1,200 over 1,200 players that are still active in this portal, and there's a very good portion of them that may not find a home. Almost assuredly won't find a home in Division One football.
Well, I mean, it's the gamble you take when you get into the portal.
Yeah, yeah, and that's and that kind of ties back into this situation that they're having in NCAA basketball as well.
Hmm.
Like there are guys that have chosen the professional route, and the one that's on everybody's mind right now is the Alabama center Bediako, who was a guy who was at Alabama. Like he played his time there. He wasn't a guy who ran out of eligibility. He made a conscious decision to enter the NBA draft after he played at a time where there was NIL, and now he's decided he wants to come back because the NBA hasn't worked out for him.
Hmm.
It's hard to criticize Alabama and not criticize some of these other schools like Louisville, Baylor. I know some teams have some former Euro pros. They're on their team, and I don't like that either. But I think the part of these situations that where you really started to get into this conflict of interest is when you read, like, it should, the Bediako case shows just how powerless the NCAA is. Because when you read that TRO that they've been granted, and this is really where I have my main sticking point in terms of a problem, because this doesn't feel like due process. This feels like finding a loophole. Is the judge that signed this TRO is an Alabama graduate and an Alabama donor. He falls under the $100,000, $250,000 donation category for the University of Alabama. He's the judge that signed it. Feels like a real conflict of interest, but that's neither here nor there. But when you read that TRO, I believe the fifth stipulation is that the NCAA cannot punish Alabama. Like that's in there. And if they do punish Alabama, then there will be legal ramifications for them if they were to say, because like people have made the point, well, the NCAA runs the postseason for basketball, but it's explicitly stated that if Alabama is treated differently because of this player on their team, like if they're forced to vacate wins and it impacts their standing in terms of the end of season tournament, then they can face legal ramification for that. Now, granted, he's not guaranteed to continue playing. They have a hearing set for January 27th, I believe. But it continues to show that just how messed up college sports is and just how powerless the NCAA is to do things about it. We have to have some change, and that change is going to come when people realize that just how powerless the NCAA is.
If they don't already know it.
Yeah. It feels glaring, but seemingly a lot of people still don't understand.
Yep. Well, here's what we understand, and that is there'll be 2 football games. One of them is going to be in Denver. One of them is going to be in Seattle. And I think, from my standpoint, I want to see New England and the Rams in the Super Bowl, but I think it's going to be New England and probably the Seahawks.
Yeah. What's it called? I don't think the result. I think the result matters more in Denver than it does in Seattle. Just purely the matchup wise. Like, I'm not sure anybody wants to see Denver and Jarrett Stidham playing in a Super Bowl against one of those 2 juggernauts from the NFC.
Right.
So
I think you're right. I think if you're a TV executive, the one you want is Boston and LA, which would be New England and the Rams.
Yeah.
Fortunately for the NFL, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, this is not a made-for-TV sport. So whoever shows up in the Super Bowl is going to show up in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but remember, Jim, the NFL scripted. That's what everybody says.
Oh, yeah. Well, if they are, then they got to fire the script writer, because this is not how you end it.
No, this is not how the script was supposed to unfold.
No, this is not a storybook ending, boys and girls. So I don't know. Is Seattle and the Patriots a bad result? No. It's likely the 2 best teams in their respective conferences.
Yeah.
Does the storyline with Matthew Stafford and the Rams versus the Patriots and Drake May make for a better one? I think it does.
Yeah. You also would have your bigger media markets as well, which you mentioned.
Absolutely. So we'll have to see how this plays out. But we will know come Monday when we're back at our normal time, back at around 3:00. And, tell you what, buddy, you just stay safe and warm. We are going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 10, 12 inches of snow here, and then 2 inches of ice.
Yeah.
So, I'm just hoping that our electric holds out. So that's my plan here.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be lucky enough to get any snow. I think I'm getting just pure ice, which is, I think, probably definitely the worst of the 2 options.
I'd rather have snow than the ice. The ice is a mess.
Yeah, the ice is what caused all the problems.
Yeah, we're gonna get the 2 inches of ice after we get the snow.
Yeah,
So, and that's actually from a snow standpoint, the ice on top of the snow is actually a little bit better in that regard from a driving standpoint.
Yeah.
But don't go out, folks, if you are in this snowmageddon up the I-95 corridor. Just hang home and get your stuff done this next day or so, and get back in the house, because it's going to be cold and it's going to be snowy and it's not going to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, heck, I think it was like on Monday or Tuesday. My mom went to the grocery store, and she had told me, she's like, I went there and they were already out of bread. They're like, they don't have bananas, they don't have bread, they have nothing. I was like, yeah, like that's, man, you let the cold get down south a little bit,
Right.
and people lose their heads. Like they don't know how to act
Right.
when the the threat of snow and ice comes down south. It's like it happens once every couple of years where you get kind of an event like this,
Sure.
and every single time it's like they've never seen it before. It's insane.
Well, just be careful. That's all I can tell you.
Yep.
And I don't plan on leaving this building until I have to, and that may be May at this point. We'll have to see. But anyway, we're gonna be back on Monday. We'll have some fun things